Hello dear listener, please subscribe to our channel, enjoy watching. Hey, man, have you ever had one of those mornings where everything feels just slightly off? Like the universe is setting you up for something big, but you don't know what yet? That's how it started for me. It was a Thursday, not even a Friday, so you can't even blame the weekend vibes. But there was something in the air that day, a slight tension that hummed like the taut string of a bow just before it snaps. I remember waking up earlier than usual, and instead of rolling back over to sleep, I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling that something was brewing. It didn't take long for the source of that tension to make itself known. Emily, my wife, was up too, already dressed and tapping away at her phone with more intensity than a morning scroll through Instagram should require. She barely looked up when I walked into the kitchen, just muttered a half-hearted morning without making eye contact. And right then, I knew something was up. Over the years, you get to know your spouse's tells. It's like a poker game, and I had learned to read Emily's bluffs pretty damn well. That morning, she was giving off every sign of a woman about to pull a fast one. But I didn't say anything. Not yet. Instead, I watched and waited, letting the tension build, like a fisherman letting the line out just enough before reeling in the catch. Emily had always been the social type, the kind who couldn't stay still for too long. We used to joke about it, how she'd get cabin fever if she was home for more than a day. So when she told me that she had a girls' night planned after work, I didn't bat an eye. But when she added that she might not be back until late the next day because the girls were planning a spa getaway, I knew something was wrong. Emily had never been great at lying, not when it counted. And that line, about the spa, had the distinct ring of bullshit. I didn't let on that I was suspicious. I just smiled, kissed her on the cheek, and told her to have fun. Meanwhile, my mind was already in overdrive, piecing together the puzzle. That night, after she left, I did something I'd never done in our entire marriage. I opened her laptop and checked her emails. I'm not proud of it, but I had to know. And what I found, well, let's just say it was enough to make my blood boil. There were messages from someone named Greg. The kind of messages that had no business being exchanged between a married woman and a man who wasn't her husband. They weren't explicit, Emily wasn't stupid, but there was enough innuendo, enough flirtation, to tell me everything I needed to know. This spa getaway was nothing more than a cover for a rendezvous with Greg. I could have confronted her right then and there, blown up her phone with accusations, or stormed over to the spa to catch them in the act. But where's the satisfaction in that? No, I needed to play this smart. I needed to make them pay. So I waited. The next morning, Emily sent a text saying she'd be back in the evening. I didn't reply. Instead, I got to work. I knew exactly where she was. Thanks to her Find My app, which we had both agreed to share for safety reasons, ironic, right? I saw that she wasn't at a spa but at some cabin out in the woods, a good 2-hour drive from her place. I chuckled at the thought of them, probably sipping wine in front of a fire, thinking they were so clever. They had no idea what was coming. I spent the day making preparations. By the time Emily got back, I had everything in place. She walked through the door, all smiles, looking relaxed and refreshed. For a moment, I almost second-guessed myself, almost thought about forgiving her. But then I remembered the emails, the lies, and that fleeting moment of doubt evaporated. She kissed me on the cheek, asking how my day was, acting like everything was perfectly normal. I played along, keeping my face neutral, pretending that nothing was wrong. But inside, I was already counting down the minutes until my plan would unfold. We had dinner, watched some TV, and she went to bed early, exhausted from her girls' weekend. I waited until I was sure she was asleep, then slipped out of bed and headed to the garage where I had stashed the items I needed. First, I sent an anonymous email to Greg from Emily's account. I made it sound urgent, pleading with him to meet her at the cabin the next night. She wrote, "I need to talk to you. Alone." Then I deleted all traces of the email from her sent folder and from the trash, making sure she wouldn't notice a thing. The next day, Emily left for work, kissing me goodbye as if she hadn't spent the previous night lying beside me with a heart full of deceit. I watched her drive off, then packed my bag and headed out myself. I didn't go to work. Instead, I drove to that cabin. It wasn't hard to find, thanks again to the Find My app. The place was as picturesque as you'd expect, nestled deep in the woods, isolated from prying eyes. Perfect for what I had planned. Greg showed up right on time. I watched from a distance as he parked his car and walked up to the cabin, glancing around nervously like he half expected to see me there. He knocked, waited, then knocked again. I could almost feel his confusion when no one answered. I waited until he had tried the door, found it unlocked, and stepped inside. Then, I made my move. The door creaked as I pushed it open, and Greg whipped around, his face a mask of surprise. "Who the hell are you?" he stammered. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me with a deliberate click. Let's just say I'm someone who doesn't appreciate being lied to. He paled as the realization hit him. "Oh, shit, yeah," I interrupted, taking a step closer. "Oh, shit." Greg tried to talk his way out of it, stammering excuses, blaming Emily, blaming the situation, even trying to play the victim. But I wasn't interested in his bullshit. I just stood there, letting him dig his own grave with words until he finally ran out of steam. "I know what you've been doing," I said quietly. "And now, it's time to pay." Greg's eyes widened, and for a moment, I thought he might try to run. But we both knew he wouldn't get far. I took another step closer, my voice low and cold. "You're going to end things with Emily. You're going to disappear from her life. And if you even think about contacting her again, you won't live long enough to regret it." He opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off. "This isn't a negotiation, Greg. This is me being generous. Walk away now, and you get to keep your life." Greg was a coward at heart. I could see it in his eyes. He nodded, swallowing hard. Okay, I'll do it." "Good." I turned and walked out of the cabin, leaving the door open behind me. I didn't look back, but I could hear him scrambling to follow, desperate to escape the situation he had stupidly walked into. As I got into my car, I saw Greg driving away in the opposite direction, his tires kicking up dirt and gravel as he sped down the road. I smiled to myself, satisfied that the first part of my plan had gone off without a hitch. But I wasn't done yet. That evening, Emily came home, her mood noticeably better than it had been in weeks. I watched her carefully, noting the way she seemed more relaxed, more at ease. I wondered if she thought Greg had gotten cold feet or if she assumed she had just dodged a bullet. Either way, she had no idea what was really going on. We went to bed as usual, but I couldn't sleep. My mind was too busy, buzzing with the anticipation of what was to come. The next morning, I told Emily I had to leave for a business trip, something that had come up last minute. She barely batted an eye, just kissed me goodbye and told me to be safe. I could tell she was already thinking about Greg, probably planning when she could sneak off to see him again. But Greg wouldn't be answering her calls. Not anymore. I didn't go far, just to a hotel in the next town over, where I could keep an eye on things from a distance. I needed to make sure that everything played out exactly as I had planned. And it did. 2 days later, Emily was frantic. Greg had completely ghosted her. No calls, no texts, no emails. She tried to track him down, but he had vanished, as if he had never existed. I watched her unravel, watched the anxiety build as she realized she had no control over the situation anymore. Then came the kicker. I made sure Emily was home when the police showed up at our door. She was a mess, pacing back and forth when they knocked. I let them in, pretending to be just as confused as she was. They asked her if she knew a Gregory Pierce, to which she stammered out a hesitant yes. They told her Greg was missing. His car had been found abandoned near the cabin, but there was no sign of him. They asked if she knew where he might have gone, if he had mentioned any plans, or if there was anyone who might want to harm him. Emily's face drained of color as she realized the implications. She stumbled over her words, trying to piece together a story that wouldn't incriminate her. But the more she talked, the more tangled she became. Finally, they asked her to come down to the station for further questioning. I could see the fear in her eyes as she looked at me, silently begging for help. But I just stood there, stone-faced, letting her drown in the mess she had created. As they led her out of the house, she turned to me one last time, her voice trembling. "Please, you have to help me. I didn't do anything wrong." I met her gaze, my expression unreadable, and simply said, "I'm sorry, Emily. I'd rather not." And just like that, she was gone. Over the next few weeks, Emily's life fell apart. The police couldn't pin Greg's disappearance on her, but the suspicion alone was enough to ruin her. Her friends distanced themselves, her job became a nightmare, and she was left with nothing but the shattered remains of the life she had once known. And me? I moved on. I filed for divorce and never looked back. As for Greg, well, I wasn't worried. He was gone, out of the picture for good, and I had no doubt he would stay that way. The best part? Emily never knew the truth. She never knew how I had orchestrated the entire thing, how I had manipulated every piece of the puzzle until it fit perfectly into place. She never knew that I was the one who had played her all along. In the end, justice was served, not by the law, but by me. And as I watched her life crumble, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. After all, revenge is a dish best served cold. If you leave a comment, tell us what you think about the story you heard. It's important to us and will help us find and tell stories that you find interesting. Thank you for watching us.